Taf Shin Lamed Gimel. Taf Shin Lamed Gimel is 1973, and I think the spirit of the Farbrengen is before the Yom Kippur War. So let's bring up the text. Okay. So this is a Sicha B'Siyata D'Shmaya, Sicha Shabbos Parshas Devarim, which is also, of course, Shabbos Chazon, which Chazon is the Haftarah, which is the Haftarah of Yeshaya from this week's Parsha, the last of the 3 weeks. And it was that year, Vav Menachem Av, the year Tafshin Lamed Gimel, 1973. So again, the Haftarah starts off with Chazon. Is the vision of Yeshaya Hanavi, which is actually unlike the character of the prophecies of Yeshaya, who's usually the prophet of hope and the prophet of redemption. But in this prophecy, he prophesies about the destruction of the temple. And therefore, we read it before Tisha B'Av. So the Rebbe is going to give the positive side to the Haftarah of Shabbos Chazon. So the Rebbe says, "B'negei Shabbos Chazon," the Shabbos, that's what we call the Shabbos, Shabbos Shofnei Tisha B'Av, the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av. Shenikras Hashem. Why do we call it Shabbos Chazon? Again, the word Chazon means the Shabbos of vision, because it starts off Chazon Yeshaya. Yeshaya had a vision. Well, so why do we call it Shabbos Chazon? Shenikras Hashem ha'aschala haftarah shebehem esaymim es shleishes haftarah shebehem meduber oides hebach hanachama. It's because that's how the Haftarah begins, which is the last of the 3 Haftarahs that talk about, the Rebbe says, the opposite of consolation. Means Nachama means to console, which starts next week is Shabbos Nachmu. So the first 3 Haftarahs of the 3 weeks are the opposite of Nachama, because they're prophecies of the destruction. Is Harikivan Sheklos Inin HaChurban Hu B'chdei Shla'achar Zatia Nachama B'Kaflayim. Even though we know that traditionally the idea of a destruction is so after the destruction comes a double Nechama. That's why next week's Parsha, Haftarah starts Nachamu, Nachamu, 2 times Nechama. So the Rebbe says, but nevertheless, is Behechrech Leima, we must say, Sheba Haftarah Zu Atzma, within the Haftarah itself, Yesh Negam Inyan Shu Heipach HaChurban. It's not enough that the Haftarah is leading. That next week we should come to Nachamu Nachamu, which is also, of course, a Haftarah of a prophecy of Yeshaya. But within the Haftarah itself, of Chazon, which is seemingly the opposite of Nachama, should already be a message that's opposite of the destruction. The Rebbe explains. The necessity to say this, that in the Haftarah itself there's already a message, which is the opposite of the Churban, of Geulah, or of hope. We know that the Torah is a Torah of kindness. It's called Torah's Chesed. It's not enough to say that what defines Torah as a Torah of kindness is that in general, and it leads, its tachlis, its bottom line is all that it comes to reaches Chesed. Everything as it is in itself, every step of Torah, every section of Torah itself is a Torah of kindness. Not that it leads to. Tachlis means it leads to Chesed. It's not that it leads to Chesed. Every part of it's Chesed. Why? What's the proof to say that? You could say there's a concept of there's the path that leads. There's difficult and there's bad. But eventually you'll get to it. And we're looking at the subtotal, the bottom line. Why do you have to say that every part of Torah is Chesed if it's called Torah's Chesed? The Rebbe answers. Because the Torah is also called Torah's Emes, the Torah of truth. The Inyan HaEmes, and what is what's the character and the definition of truth? The Amita in its full truthness. Hu lo yirak b'negei l'sefer tachas hadavar. The definition of the truth, we know, means emes, right? Has to be emes mikol tzad, right? It has to be totally true. So it's not, truth is not that it leads to something true. Truth has to be from the beginning to end. The words emes, which makes up the Hebrew word for truth, is shemur keves, is made up of gimel oisis of 3 letters, right? Aleph, mem, tav. Shehem aschala, aleph. The emtzam mem v'soif tov. has in it the beginning, middle, and end of the alphabet, right? The Aleph base, it starts with Aleph, ends with Taf, and the middle letter is about Mem. Why? Why is Emes made up of such a sequence of the beginning, middle, and end of the Aleph base? Is to teach us. Emes, what is the definition and character, and how do you know if something is really true? It has to be true and true. And if you're going to say if there's one detail, it's not true, but it brings to truth. But it itself is not true. Then you're saying only a majority of the subject is true, but not everything. So emes has to be in every detail. Every detail has to be truth. It can't be something that's untrue. There was people that used to come to Eretz Yisrael. They would get on the birthright, so they would have to pay a ticket. And as soon as they got to Eretz Yisrael, they would run to the fences. They would run to the shtachim and throw stones at soldiers. So they asked them, "What's the justification? You're coming on a program that's sponsored by people to bring you for Zionism, for your Jewishness, and you're going to protest anti that." So he said, "Well, the means justifies the ends justifies the means. It's so important for us to protest, even if it's not true that we went on false pretenses. It's okay. That's not emes. Emes means you're saying even if you believe what you're doing is true, but you know what you're doing right now is not true. You're just saying the end of it is true. That's not emes. Emes has to be emes in every single prat. There can't be a detail that's even if it leads to truth, if it itself is not true, it's not emes. That's the character of emes. Emes has to be true through and through. So therefore the Rebbe says, what's the point? If Torah is called Torah's chesed, the Torah of kindness, and it's called Torah's emes, the Torah of truth, therefore you have to say that the chesed is always true. That there is no part of the Torah that's not chesed, because then it's not a Torah's emes. So you're calling it a Torah of chesed, but then there's parts of the Torah that are not chesed, that's not a Torah's emes. You can call it Torah's chesed, you can't call it Torah's emes, because there's parts of the Torah that's not really chesed. It leads to chesed, but it's not really chesed. But if you're calling it a Torah of emes, then every part has to be chesed. So therefore the Rebbe says, even when we find punishments, admonishment, and surely punishments, that's actually painful. You have to say it's chesed because it comes from Torah's emes. And Torah says it's Torah's chesed and emes, and it so means it's chesed shel emes. It's a true emes. It's a true chesed. It's not that it's going to bring an atonement, a kapara, or eventually will lead to something of kindness. Even the punishments themselves are something of chesed. Ella, so how can you say that? That this is chesed. It's kindness. That the punishments themselves are kindness, not that they lead to kindness, or they lead the person to a level of kindness and truth. Ella it's possible, the Rebbe says. We don't see it. We don't realize it. We don't recognize it. It's hidden. It's called chesed mechusim. Like rachmim mechusim. It's chesed mechusim. It's hidden chesed, hidden kindness. But we have to believe with emunah amitis. We have to have true belief to understand that anything that comes from the Eibusher, even if it's a punishment, it's behelim in the truth. There is chesed in its concealment. If you just reveal that moment itself, not what it's going to lead to, you're going to see the chesed in that moment itself, the kindness in that moment itself. They avoid the kalak upon him. The Rebbe says it's not going to come. Maybe it doesn't come naturally. You have to do a little avoida, a little effort. Like the idea of taking the sun out of its hiding, out of its, so to say, wallet, like it's explained in Tanya. Yes, Jonathan.
Yes, I can say right to me now, right, that Hashem doesn't bring about unnecessary suffering. So how do we know? All right, how can we really reconcile, all right, when suffering is necessary, all right, and when suffering is not necessary, and that Hashem doesn't bring unnecessary suffering?
First of all, you have to have a emunah pshuta that's true. You have to have absolute emunah b'tachon that's true. You have to have faith and trust. But aside from that, you're right. It's a good question. I'm not here to advocate to God answer every situation. But you have to have emunah to know that if the Torah is a Torah of kindness and the Torah is a Torah of emes, that everything in the Torah is chesed. So if you open up the Torah and you see something that doesn't look kind, you have to understand it. Maybe you're not understanding it, but it doesn't mean it's not kind. It's a good question. This is a difficult subject. Around Tisha B'Av, we always have difficult subjects. The Rebbe says, Shlechein, the Rebbe says, therefore. We find this. It's a famous idea explained in the Chassidus about the Inyan of Gamzu L'Tova. This is also for the good. We know Gamzu L'Tova was called Nachum Ish Gamzu, the teacher of Rabbi Akiva. K'medubar Pam, the Rebbe says, we spoke many times. There's two types of avodas in perspective. When a person sees the good in everything. There was the avodah of Rabbi Akiva and the avodah of Nachum Ish Gamzu, Rabbi Akiva's teacher. Rabbi Akiva would say, call the Ovid Rahmana, whatever Rahmana means, whatever the compassionate one does, i.e. the Kadosh Baruch Hu, God, the Lord does, the Tav Ovid, whatever he's doing is for the positive. He saw positive, he said this has to be positive. That's what Rabbi Akiva said. But it's still not the same thing. It's not on the level of Gamzu L'Tova. This is for the good. Sha'amar Nachum Ish Gamzu, that Nachum Ish Gamzu said, the teacher of Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva said, Kol Madav Rachmana, whatever the Lord does is for the best. And Nachum Ish Gamzu, his teacher, said, this is good. Shalatav Ovid, what does it mean? What's the difference? When you say everything the Lord does is for the good, Pirusha, it means that this will lead eventually to something else that's good. It means there's something that needs to happen good, but in order for it to happen, maybe there's something bad that has to happen first. Like the story of Rabbi Akiva. We have two stories, right? We have the story of Rabbi Akiva and the story of Nachum Ish Gamzu. Hold on, Jonathan. Let me just finish the idea here. We have the story of Rabbi Akiva, who was traveling and had a light and a candle for reading. He had a rooster to wake him up. He had a donkey to ride on. He couldn't come into the city because it was closed. He camps outside the city. The wind comes and blows out the fire. The cat comes and eats the chicken, the rooster. Another cat, the wild cat comes and the lion comes and eats his donkey. He's left with nothing. No light, no means of transportation, no alarm clock. So he says, whatever the Lord does is for the best. What happened was that a group of bandits comes to the city, and sacks the city, and had the chicken been making noise and the donkey been making noise, and surely the light been lit, so they would see him and they would kill him too. So it was actually not a good thing that his light went out and his chicken was eaten and his donkey was eaten, but it led to something. It saved his life. So even though it was bad itself, but it led to something amazing for him to be saved. That's the story of Rabbi Akiva. So he says, he said, you see, everything the Lord does is for the best, even though the things itself wasn't good, but it saved his life. The story itself wasn't good. His fire went out, his rooster was eaten, his donkey was killed. But came from that something positive. But the story of Nachum Ish Gamzu was different. What does this mean? Not only that the story that we'll say in a second led to something good, the story itself was good. Maybe one wouldn't see it to be good. You have to find the good in it. What's the story of Nachum Ish Gamzu? He's sent by the rabbis on behalf of Klal Yisrael. They sent him as a messenger of the Jewish people of Eretz Yisrael. It means he had a tremendous responsibility. It wasn't a private mission to go and bribe the Roman emperor to save the Jewish people from a bad decree. They sent him with a chest of gold and diamonds and precious stones because they figured that's what the Roman wants. That's what the guy wants. He wants to get more money. So they're sending him with gold to bribe him. He goes to the hotel. They ask him what he's doing. He says they steal all his money. The hotel owner steals all his money and fills the box with sand. Now you open up a box of sand. Imagine he showed up to Rome, to the emperor, and says, here's a gift to the Jewish people. They want you to stop making decrees against Judaism, and they're gifting you with a box of sand. So that looks horrible. But he said, Gamzu Tova, you're going to see good in this itself. It's not going to lead to good. This itself is good. Why? What happened? The hotel owner took all the gold and instead put in dirt. But what was the miracle? So the Roman emperor was about to lose it. Elijah the prophet comes down dressed as a minister and says, no, this is special sand. This is the miracle sand. This is the sand of Avram that he used to fight the four kings. And it ended up becoming lechitzim, avonim, belistrois. It was arrows and cannons. It was amazing value to the emperor. He used it, gunpowder, missiles. It was way ahead of its time to fight its enemies. It was much more valuable than gold and silver. Who needs gold and silver? He has plenty of that. He doesn't have magic sand. It wasn't that the dirt led to something good. Who knows if he would have responded kindly to a box of gold and diamonds? He has plenty of that. When they bring him a box of magic sand, he was extremely excited. So the story itself was good. Gamzu, this itself was the taiva. It's even more valuable than the gold and the silver and the precious stones. The king had plenty of that. The king's not lacking anything. But the dirt, the magic sand, became more valuable than the king couldn't buy that kind of power. It wasn't around, it wasn't available for him. From this, so what's the difference? So we see that Gam Zul Toiva is even greater than Koman David Rahmana. Rabbi Kiva said what happened was bad, but it led to good. Nochamish Gamzu said this itself is good. And the Rebbe always says it's not just how the story is, it's how you believe the story. When you believe Koman David Rahmana Latav David, then that's the reality. Because Kemaim Panim Lepanim. When you believe Gamzu Toiva, that's the reality. It's up to you how you're going to translate this a situation in your life. Doesn't always have to be with an emperor in a box of sand, but there's situations that happen in our life. It's up to us how we translate it. Yes, Jonathan.
How we got the expression right that there's what's good to you and what's good for you, and it's kind of a difference. There's a difference between what's good to you and what's good for you.
Yes, but that can also be translated in different ways. Where a person, where a person wants something that they shouldn't have. So that's also something that has to be taken. Here we're talking about that it's good. The question is if it leads to good or if it itself is good.
And I want to say something else, right? Yes, I once heard, right, that, they're just like we think that something is a mess. It's like a rocket ship, right? Takes out a lot of dirt, and, when it takes off, right, it leaves behind a lot of dirt, right, and a lot of schmutz and everything, but the rocket still ascends up in the air and it flies, right? So like all of that junk is coming out for it to ascend up, all right? So it's a good thing, okay? So like something bad is ultimately leads to something good.
Okay, but that's like Rabbi Kiva. Okay, let's continue. Thank you. Moving from this is understood. Shabbos Chazon. We have to apply this rule to when we're coming this Shabbos, to the Haftarah of Shabbos Chazon of the vision. If it's part of Torah, which Chazon is, it's a vision and a prophecy of Yeshaya Navi, and we read it on the Torah after the Torah reading on Shabbos and Shul. Shehi Torah's Chesed, therefore it's part of the Torah, which is the Torah of kindness. B'chol Protel, like we said, it's not that it leads to kindness, because it's Torah's emes, and therefore the emes applies to the Chesed. And therefore, every detail has to be of chesed. Because it has to have truth in all its details. Therefore, we can't say that the destruction that the vision is about is going to lead to a double nachmu. Excuse me, it itself is kindness. So how do we say that? The idea is like this. What does it mean, the vision of Yeshaya Navi? He has a vision, a prophecy about the destruction. That's the content of the Haftarah. That's the message of the Haftarah. Aside from the last verse that we learned to Chassidus on this week of Siyam b'mishpat tepad v'shaveh b'tzedakah. Shapedia me'inyin the Chazon Yeshaya he idei mishpat tzedakah. How do we get out of the situation that Yeshaya is telling us a prophecy about, i.e., the destruction? Is when we learn Torah, like we say mishpat the hilchasa b'tzedakah, and we give tzedakah charity. But the rest of the message of the Haftarah, the things that are opposite of consolation. Nevertheless, the Rebbe says, we have the famous teaching of the holy Rebbe, the Rebbe Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev. The Rebbe mentions this idea, this Torah of the Rebbe Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev many times, the Berditchev Rav. Shabbos Chazon, when it comes Shabbos Chazon, and the word Chazon again means a vision, to see something. God chose every single individual the third temple. So those who have our temple pins, put them on Shabbos. The Hainu, meaning to say, Shehu kvar muchin lagamri. The Beis HaMikdash is ready. Bonoi umshruchlol. It's totally ready to be 100% complete. Kach shekol echad yochel roise. It's so complete that you could see it. At ve'achin is an nimshach gam lashon targum. And therefore, when the Rebbe says we say it in English, so you should understand. I don't mean English, but English of the time. The targum, which is the unkelis, the Aramaic, which Chazon shu targum shel re'i. What does the Chazon mean? It's like to say it was the English of the time. That means to see something. I see godliness from my flesh. For my flesh, I could see godliness. What's the idea of targum? It's something that's common. Everyone knows that language. Maybe today we don't, but then they did. That's what we learned in Gemara Megillah. We learned about the Aramaic that's in the Torah. That's how targum is in Torah. It means it's Hebrew letters, but it's the meaning is targum is the common language. Like we've brought the Gemara in Megillah brings the proof of Yigar Shadusa. That Lavan called the heap Yigar Shadusa, and Yaakov called it Galed. What's the idea? Why do we say it in English, so to say? Chazon, so everyone should understand it. It's not some hint to some spiritual idea. That if you understand English, you understand that this week you could see the Beis HaMikdash. So why don't we see it? I mean, some of us at least. Your eyes are not ready to see it. It's like a person who needs a strong pair of glasses. If you're not wearing your glasses, it doesn't mean that whatever is out there is not there. If you're not going to see the wall, doesn't mean if you walk into the wall, you're not going to hit yourself. You just can't see it because you're not wearing your glasses. Your eyes can't see it, unfortunately. So too spiritually. Just because you can't see something doesn't mean it's not there. You haven't refined your eyes yet to be able to see the Beis HaMikdash. That's standing ready, right, to come down right now. But when you put on your spiritual glasses, i.e., you elevate yourself to the level that you could see it, you'll see the Beis HaMikdash. The Rebbe says, the fact the very fact that you're not ready yet to see it because you haven't yet refined your body, that your physical eyes in English Chazon could see the Beis HaMikdash, doesn't mean the Beis HaMikdash is not standing, is not ready to come down. So too the rest of the message, not just the message of the first opening line of Chazon Yeshaya, like the Rebbe Yitzchak says that we could see the Beis HaMikdash. But even if you could translate the actual verses throughout the Haftarah, if you analyze them, Heim Inyan Toiv, that's Chesed, it's good. As the Rebbe Yitzchak translates some of those verses. He gives an example. One of the expressions is, one of the lines in the Haftarah is Am Kavid Oven, a nation heavy with sin. So seemingly it's a negative statement. Means a nation full of sin. But you could also say a nation that sin is heavy. Just like something's heavy you won't carry, so too the Jewish people know that sin is heavy and they won't do it. It's hard for them. It's kosher. It's heavy for them to do an Aveira. It says when a soul sins, Tevah asks the question: is it possible? Nefesh kisechta? Question mark. Would a Jewish soul sin? So it says, "I'm covered up." Not that you're full of sin, but it's heavy for you to do sin. The Rebbe says, "Shapir Shanal ba'am kavod havin." This is what Rabbi Yitzchak says, that am kavod havin means that a nation that's heavy for it to do sin, not that it's heavy with sin. The Rebbe says actually, am kavod havin makes the more sense to say that it's heavy for it to do a sin. That's a more easier translation. It's heavy for me to do a sin. So why do we have to wait until before Levi Yitzchak? Why does no one else see that verse as a positive statement? That the Jewish people, it's hard for them to do a sin, it's heavy for them to do a sin. Because they only saw the negative in the verse. But the kindness of the verse, that it's a statement of pride about the Jewish people. That's hard for us to do a sin is because it was hidden chesed. But as we get closer to the days of Mashiach, it's something that's obvious, comes clear. The Rebbe says that's the most simple of all translation. Moving to the Rebbe says the bottom line from this we see. Shabbos Chazon, and it comes the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av. It's called Shabbos of Vision. Yesh kvar inin shel Geulah. The Beis HaMikdash is there. There's redemption there. Riyas Beis HaMikdash, you could see the temple. Yesh lahaysiv, the Rebbe adds. Shekivan shemedubar oidis Riyas HaMikdash lasid. The Rebbe says if we're talking about that, what are we seeing? We're seeing forward, not backwards. We're seeing forward towards the third temple. Our movement is understood. It's considered a good in chesed. Not that it's good versus where we are now, or at least we think we are now, in exile, in Gullahs. If we're looking towards it, they're not showing us the old temple. God's showing us the new temple. Means we're not looking behind us, we're looking forward. Means to say that what's coming forward has to be greater, not just from the situation that we find ourselves now, or we put ourselves in now, which is the Gullahs, but even greater than how it was in the first and second temple. The Rebbe says, he himself spoke about this before. The first two temples were man-made. The first temple was made by Shlomo. The second temple was made by Koirish V'hurdis. I'm not sure why it's Koirish Daryavish, but Koirish was before Daryavish, as the beginning of the Aliyah of the second. Cyrus the Great. V'ilu Beis HaMikdash Ashlishi. But the third temple is going to be built by Hashem, or is built by Hashem, like Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says. It's ready, standing. Migdash Adnai Koinu Ne'edecha. It's God's handiwork. Shalchein Lo Yecherev Laila. That's why it'll never be destroyed, because it's God's handiwork. The first two temples were man-made. But Iker, the Rebbe says, the idea is like this. Shiriyas HaMigdash Lasid Poyeles Sha'achin Yumshech V'Poyel. What is the idea of seeing something? The idea of seeing something that it should be affected. By seeing something, it brings that it's going to come faster. Kamavor Sham, as the example given by Rebbe Levi Yitzchak Berditchev. He says the mashal mi'av sheyesh ben yaker. The Rebbe Levi Yitzchak gives an example of the third temple, and the idea of showing us the third temple on Shabbos Chazon of a son who has a very dear father who has a very dear son. And he makes him a very nice garment. But the story is that the son goes and muddies the garment. He plays tackle football with it. And the father is offended. He says, I gave you a beautiful garment. You made it, you destroyed it. You tore it, you ripped it up. So he makes him a second garment. And the kid behaves the same way. Doesn't know how to respect it, doesn't know how to treat it nicely. Gets it muddy and torn. The father says, you're not mature enough. I can't trust you with this precious garment. But not because I don't love you. I love you, just not ready yet. So I'm going to make you a third garment, and when you mature and ready, you'll have it. But how do I give you motivation to know that we have to make the third garment? The third garment's made, it's here. And I'll show it to you every once in a while. So you should see that if you change your ways and you mature and you're ready to protect it, I'll give it to you. And Rabbi Yitzchak Berditchev said that's the example of Shabbos Chazon. God gave us the first temple, we destroyed it with our sins. God gave us the second temple, we destroyed it with our sins, with our hate. So he makes the third temple and he says, listen, Chevra, when you're ready to behave and have Avos Yisrael and do Torah mitzvahs and stop serving the idols of the time, the third temple is waiting for you. And this motivates us to get ready for the third temple. He makes the third garment. He doesn't let him wear it because the child doesn't know how to behave and doesn't know how to take care of it. He hides it. Every once in a while, there's a set time, like Shabbos Chazon, that he shows us that third garment, the third temple. See, look, if you're going to behave properly, you'll be gifted this third one as well. But I just need to know that you're ready to handle it. This itself would motivate the child to mature and to behave. Achinasa, it's like Maitev, until even if it's against his nature to be normal, to be mature enough to take care of it, even if he's wild by nature, but he's going to work on himself to be able to show that he's ready to have the third garment. And then the father gives him the garment. Because now the father feels confident that the child won't return to his bad ways. Well, this is the parallel. This is what we're talking about. Why does God show us the ready third temple that's just ready to come down? Who is because to awaken. Etzlai by us, by the Jews, v'ratzin the desire, v'tshukah the ratzin the will, v'tshukah the desire. Sha'achin yitin lanu b'par, that God should give us the third temple that's ready. All he has to do is bring it down. There's no great event that has to happen. The temple comes down, it goes right in its spot on top of the Temple Mount. V'inyan zeh payal alav l'shanas hanagasa, and this affects for the child to change their ways. Shezeu klaus in tshuva, that's what tshuva means, to return. V'arinin nahira tshuva nasa tzadik gomer k'psak din gemara. And a person could, with one thought, one honest thought of repentance and return, could become a complete tzaddik in a second. Like the Talmud says, a person could get engaged. It's not false representation. If a person says conditions with his future wife that I'm getting engaged to you on the condition that I'm a tzaddik, the halacha says even if he's a rasha, maybe he had a thought of tshuva. If he had a thought of tshuva, then he becomes a tzaddik. V'oz ba'agula mitzvah shleima miyad, and Mashiach comes immediately. Hayoim, like Eliyahu Navi said, quoted the verse to Rabbi Shua ben Levi today in Mikoil Tishmol. If you just listen to my mitzvahs, to my koil, to my voice, in the simchas olam al reishim, in a way of tremendous joy. We have a few more minutes. Let's just do the next. This is the first talk. The Rebbe said this. This is what we said before. The Shabbos Chazon, that the Shabbos of the vision, meaning this Shabbos, that in its internal, like it's not that it's a vision of destruction, but it's a vision that we see the third temple. It itself is a Shabbos, meaning it's not that it leads to something good. The Chazon itself is positive. Like it says, oven covered me oven. That it's hard for us to do sin. The Rebbe says we're not talking on some high mystical level. But even for the most simple-minded person, this has to be an idea. It talks about the days of Mashiach. Everyone is going to know me, whether they're the smaller people or the larger people. This is talking about when Mashiach already comes. But even while we're still holding the Geulah, God still has to pick us up, each one, both from our spiritual space and our physical space. Some of us are lost spiritually. God has to pick us up and take us back to Yerushalayim. And some of us are physically far, have to be taken back to Yerushalayim. Therefore, nevertheless, every person has to try to understand this idea that the vision of Chazon is something that's real, that you could see the Beis HaMikdash, and Geulah is here. You just have to see it. The Rebbe says, therefore, that's why it starts right away that this is the vision of Yeshaya. Why is Yeshaya called Yeshaya? The word Yeshaya means Yeshua, the prophet of salvation. Yeshua, the salvation of redemption. This is the Chiddush, Rebbe says. This is what's unique of the Haftarah of this Shabbos, meaning in comparison to the two previous Shabbosim, which are also from the 3 weeks, the first two prophecies that we read about the destruction are from the prophet Yirmiyah, and Yirmiyah was the prophet of mainly of destruction. The word Yirmiyah has in it the word mar, bitter, marli mar, right? Because you could turn Yirmiyah's name into positive. If you take the two middle words of Yirmiyah and you take it Ram Yudke to elevate God, but you have to change the letters around. Yeshaya's name is positive. It's a name of redemption, of salvation. The Rebbe says we find a very interesting thing with regard to the first Tisha B'Av. What's the first Tisha B'Av in our history? The story of the spies. The story of the spies, that's what we know, that the spies came back. Gemara in Tainus teaches us that the spies came back on Erev Tisha B'Av. And they cried the night into Tisha B'Av. God says, you know what, you're going to cry? You're going to cry every night. Every year Tisha B'Av. Because there's going to be the destruction. So the Gemara tells us, the Negea Tisha B'Av Rishon, Shabai Royim Shabipnim Shalachama. But if you analyze the story of what happened, how did it work out? The Gemara tries to figure out how did the days, the sequence of the days work out that they came back on the 8th of Av. Well, the Rebbe says, the Rebbe is wondering why no one paid attention to this idea. The Rebbe says, as we said many times, a lot of times we think too deep. And when you think deep, you pass over the simple ideas. So the Rebbe says sometimes something so simple we overlook. When Tisha B'Av Rishon, the first year Tisha B'Av, when the spies came back from 40 days of spying out the land. And they cried that night. So they came on the 8th and they cried the whole night of Tisha B'Av going into the 9th. When did they come back? They came back on the Erev Tisha B'Av, meaning the 8th of Av. God said, you're crying a cry of wastefulness. There's no reason, you have no business to be crying. Some ideas that there's something wrong with going to Eretz Yisrael. You're going to cry. You're going to cry every night this year. So the Gemara in time, it says, "What? How do we work? How do we find the day? How do we know that they came back on Tisha B'Av, on Erev Tisha B'Av?" It says, because Moshe only sent the Meraglim on the 29th of Sivan. The Gemara, the Rebbe is going to the end of the calculation, but the beginning calculation is we know what day they came to there, and then they had the 30 days they had 3 days of walking, and 30 days of meat, and 7 days of Miriam, right? In the sequence of events. So they had the Baloischa, they have the 30 days of meat because they cried for meat, so they had 30 days, and then they had 7 days after Miriam speaks Lashon Hara on Moshe, so they have to wait for 7 days. So that's another 7 days. So it's 30. It's 3 plus 7 is 10 plus the 30 is already 40 days to go into before leading up and leads to Esther V'Teisha of Sivan, the 29th of Sivan. Then Moshe sends the spies. They come back after 40 days. So if you count the days, you have 2 of Sivan, 29th and 30th. They have the 29 days of Tammuz, because Tammuz is always 29 days. Is Havel Lamed Aleph, that's together 29 plus 2 is 31. V'ches Mi'av, in the 8th days of Av, is Lamed Tes, it's only 39 days. And it says they went 40 days. So they didn't come back on the 8th of Av. They came back on the 9th of Av, which means they cried on the 10th of Av. So Rabbi says no. Tammuz Ahi Shaita, that year Tammuz, Miluya, it was 30 days. So if Tammuz is not 29 days, 30 days, so then you have one more day, and then they came on the 8th, and therefore they cried on the 8th going into the 9th. That's Gemara in Tainus. They made it 30 days because it was a Male. It was Tammuz Male, a full Tammuz. Even though that always Tammuz is 29 days. Why? God made it so. Because they were Kaddish Apiyariya, that God made it so that it should work out that Tammuz is 30 days. That these two differences should come back on the 8th to give over their negative report, and they should cry the whole night, the night of the night. And we have a pasuk about this. They quote the pasuk in Eicha that you brought upon me a moyed to break my youth, but also Karelai Moyed can mean you brought a holiday to break my youth. What's the holiday? Next day of Rosh Chodesh. Naktina in the Chodesh Chodesh Shaba Acha Chodesh Malay of Dinan Beis Yomim Rosh Chodesh. Why? Because when you have 30 days after 29 days, you have the first day of Rosh Chodesh, last day of Rosh Chodesh. Bava Yom Rishon Hashleim Rosh Chodesh L'Maylim Menu. Let's say Malay V'Nim Beis Yom Tovim Chodesh Malay. A Rosh Chodesh that has 30 days has 2 days of Rosh Chodesh. It has the first day of the month, which is Rosh Chodesh, and it has the 30th day, which is Rosh Chodesh. So it has 2 holidays in 1 month. Why? Because we added another holiday, so we should break the youth on Tisha B'Av. That means that Tisha B'Av should be the day. That says basically what we're saying over here Nimtza. Shekol inyan shel Tisha B'Av nikvu melchatchila dei shekadosh baruch hu kar zimun alay moed. So what happens? How did Tisha B'Av work out the first year? Because God made an extra day a holiday of Rosh Chodesh. Lahaisav Bnei Yisrael yom shel Rosh Chodesh to ikra moed. God added another Rosh Chodesh, another day of moed, another day of holiday in order for Tisha B'Av to happen. She'asav asis melacha. We're not supposed to be doing proper work. And we know it's a special holiday for Jews. Rosh Chodesh is especially connected to Jews, like we learned many times. Rosh Chodesh what happens in Rosh Chodesh is the new moon. The Jewish people like the moon. The Jewish people are small people, therefore they like the small moon, the small luminary. Because now Chodesh Tammuz is full, so therefore it's able to be that the spies come back on the 8th of Tammuz, not the 9th of Tammuz. And a full moon means it's a level of completeness. Therefore, the Rebbe is saying, what do we see over here? That God made extra, made a holiday, made a completion in order for Tisha B'Av to happen. Tisha B'Av is a negative story. What do we see that sewed into the Tisha B'Av is positivity? It's a time of moed. We don't say tachton. On Tisha B'Av, that there's a concept of moed in Tisha B'Av itself. We do say the 8th days, but on Tisha B'Av we don't say tachton. Nevertheless, it became a day of negativity. The Jewish people have free choice. We had a choice to not make a negative day out of it, and we could have turned it into a day of simcha. We're not ruled by the cosmos. The things have to happen. The Jewish person has bechira chavshis. We don't have the limitations of nature. They could have not cried for no reason. It never would have turned into a time that led to Tisha B'Av, of the destruction of the temple. And even when they did cry, they could have repented properly for it. Because Tshuva is beyond the whole system of creation. Because it reaches in the core of the soul. That's beyond limitations. And they could have nullified that even if they did cry, but if they did proper tshuva, it wouldn't have turned into a time of crying. The Rebbe says, even now, that still we cry because the destruction did happen. The first and second temple and everything else that happened on Tisha B'Av, all the way mamish till our times. It is a negative day. But we still say this is a day of holiday. Like we said in the beginning of the talk, this is hidden kindness that we can't identify yet. We have to get rid of the coverings. That's why Mashiach is born on Tisha B'Av. And the hafach, it has in it, sewed in it, so much Geulah and Tisha B'Av. But we have to find it. And then we'll see the kindness revealed to everyone. The crying should turn into positive. The Rebbe says an amazing thing. Not that you stop crying. The crying itself is going to be positive. Like the crying of Rabbi Kiva, that he cried when he learned secrets on the teachings of Shir Hashirim. He cried cries of joy, tears of joy. Till we're going to have the crying that we have. With the coming of Mashiach, like it says, we're going to come crying to the days of Mashiach, not in crying in terror or crying in sadness, but crying in joy. I wish everyone a good Shabbos, a Shabbos Chazon, the true vision, which all be Zeicha to see the vision of Beis HaMikdash Be'eni Basar with our own eyes. Meher Rabbi Yemeinu here in Yerushalayim Kodesh. Take care, everyone. Good Shabbos.